I should have listened to the warnings. The locals called it the Forgotten Woods, a stretch of remote wilderness where campers vanished without a trace. I had read about the rumors, but I didn't believe in ghost stories. I was more worried about bears and bad weather than anything supernatural. It was supposed to be a weekend escape. Just me, my best friend Kyle, and his girlfriend, Mia. We wanted to disconnect from the world, get away from city noise, and immerse ourselves in nature. The plan was simple: hike deep into the woods, set up camp by the lake, and spend 2 nights under the stars. Everything felt off the moment we arrived. The forest was eerily silent. No birds, no insects. Just the sound of our boots crunching on dead leaves. The deeper we went, the more I noticed how unnatural the stillness was. The trees stood tall and lifeless, their twisted branches stretching like skeletal fingers toward the gray sky. Kyle tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, man, don't tell me you believe in all that haunted forest crap," he chuckled, adjusting his backpack. Mia wasn't as amused. "People have gone missing here, Kyle. It's not just some dumb urban legend." I wanted to agree with her, but I pushed the thought away. By the time we reached the lake, the sun had dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows across the water. The lake was oddly still, like a giant mirror reflecting the darkening sky. We quickly set up our tents near the shoreline. The moment I drove the last stake into the ground, a strong gust of wind rushed through the trees, so sudden, so forceful, it sent a chill up my spine. "Storm's coming," Mia muttered, but there was no storm in the forecast. That first night, I struggled to sleep. I lay awake in my tent, staring at the fabric walls, listening to the heavy silence outside. Then I heard it, a single snap, like a twig breaking underfoot. I held my breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. Another snap, closer this time. My mind raced. An animal, a person. I reached for my flashlight, my fingers trembling as I clicked it on. I unzipped the tent just an inch, peeking through the opening. Nothing. Just the dark trees and the still lake beyond. But something didn't feel right. That's when I noticed it, a figure standing at the tree line, motionless, watching. My breath hitched in my throat. I blinked, and in that split second, it was gone. I wanted to believe my eyes were playing tricks on me, that it was just a shadow, a trick of the moonlight. But deep down, I knew. We weren't alone. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadowy figure standing at the tree line, watching, waiting. By the time the sun rose, I had convinced myself it was just my imagination. Maybe a trick of the light, a stress-induced hallucination from being deep in an unfamiliar forest. I didn't mention it to Kyle or Mia. No point in freaking them out over nothing. We spent most of the morning exploring the area, venturing deeper into the woods. The uneasiness from the night before still lingered in my gut, but I ignored it. Kyle was full of energy, hacking at branches with his machete and marking trees so we wouldn't get lost. Mia was quieter than usual, her eyes scanning the trees like she was expecting something to jump out at any moment. "This place is weird," she finally muttered. Kyle smirked. "It's just a forest, babe, a bunch of trees and dirt. Nothing weird about it." She shot him a look. "That's not what I mean. Haven't you noticed how empty it feels? No birds, no animals. It's like the whole forest is holding its breath." I had noticed, but before I could say anything, we stumbled upon something that made my stomach twist. A campsite. At first, I thought someone else had set up camp nearby. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't just abandoned. It was wrong. The tent was still standing, but it was ripped open from the inside, the fabric shredded like something had clawed its way out. A sleeping bag was half unzipped, stretched across the ground, as if someone had crawled out in a hurry. Beside it, a backpack lay open, its contents spilled across the dirt: clothes, a flashlight, a can of food. It looked like whoever had been here left in a hurry. Or worse, never left at all. Dude, what the hell? Kyle muttered, stepping closer. Mia held onto my arm. We need to leave now. Something about the campsite made my skin crawl. It wasn't just abandoned. It felt like it had been left behind, like whoever was here had disappeared in the middle of whatever they were doing. I took a cautious step forward, my boot crunching on something brittle, a Polaroid picture. I picked it up. The image was faded, but I could make out a group of 4 people, 2 men, 2 women, smiling at the camera. They were standing in front of the same lake where we had set up our tents. But something wasn't right. Behind them, in the trees, there was a 5th figure, tall, shadowy, featureless, watching. I felt my blood turn to ice. My hands started shaking as I flipped the photo over. There was something scribbled on the back in frantic, messy handwriting. It comes at night. It watches. Don't let it see you sleep. A branch snapped in the distance. Mia gasped, gripping my arm tighter. Kyle turned, his hand instinctively reaching for his machete. Who's there? He called out. His voice was firm, but I could hear the slight tremor in it. No answer, just the trees swaying in the wind. Then we heard it. A whisper, not from one direction, but from all around us. Software faint, indistinct, like dozens of voices speaking at once. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I turned in slow circles, my flashlight flicking between the trees, but I saw nothing. And then something moved, a shadow just at the edge of my vision. Tall, too tall. It disappeared behind a tree. Then another, and another. It wasn't moving like a person. It was gliding, weaving between the trees without making a sound. Mia was shaking. We have to go, right now. Kyle was still frozen in place, gripping his machete. It's just some animal, he muttered. Though he didn't sound convinced, that's when we saw the footprints, not ours. Fresh footprints in the dirt, leading away from the shredded tent. Barefoot, deep, like someone had been running, and they ended abruptly. Like whoever they belonged to had just vanished. A low, distant hum filled the air. Not human, not mechanical. Just a deep vibration that rattled in my bones. Then the whispering stopped, and the forest went silent again. Kyle finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We need to get back to camp. None of us argued. We turned and ran. But as we sprinted through the trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following us, something watching. And for the first time, I truly understood what the locals meant when they called this place the Forgotten Woods. We ran like hell. Branches slapped against my face. Roots threatened to trip me. But I didn't stop. None of us did. The whispering had stopped, but the silence that followed was even worse, thick, suffocating, unnatural. By the time we reached our campsite, we were gasping for air, our chests heaving. Mia collapsed onto the ground, her hands shaking violently. Kyle paced in frantic circles, muttering curses under his breath. What the hell was that? Mia's voice cracked. I wanted to tell her I had an answer, that it was just the wind, just paranoia, but I couldn't, because deep down, I knew. We weren't alone in these woods. Kyle dropped his backpack onto the ground and grabbed his water bottle, gulping it down. Okay, let's just think. Maybe, maybe we're overreacting. Maybe that old campsite was just abandoned, and those noises were animals. Or animals don't whisper. I cut him off. My voice was hollow, distant, like I was hearing myself from far away. Kyle didn't respond. He knew I was right. Then Mia whispered, "We shouldn't stay here tonight." I didn't argue. Kyle hesitated. "We can't just leave. It's already getting dark. Hiking back now could be dangerous." "Staying here is more dangerous," I shot back. We both turned to Mia. She was sitting on a log, gripping her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. Her face was pale, her eyes unfocused. "There's something in these woods," she murmured. "I felt it watching us." I didn't ask her how she knew. I felt it too. The sun was already dipping below the horizon. The sky had turned a deep, bruised purple, shadows stretching long across the ground. The thought of hiking in the dark made my stomach churn. Kyle finally sighed. "Fine, one more night, but we'll keep watch. No one sleeps alone." I wasn't happy about it, but we didn't have much choice. Something in the dark. We built up the fire as much as possible, making sure it burned bright and high. The orange glow flickered against the trees, casting long, shifting shadows that played tricks on my eyes. Every now and then, I thought I saw movement just beyond the firelight, shapes flitting between the trees. We set up shifts for the night. Kyle took first watch, while Mia and I crawled into our tents, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that thing, that figure from the Polaroid, standing outside our tent, just waiting. I don't know how much time passed before I heard it. A sound so faint, so quiet, that for a second I thought I imagined it. Breathing, not mine, not Mia's, something outside the tent. I froze, my body stiff as stone. The breathing was slow, deliberate, right next to me. Then came a sound that nearly made my heart stop. Scratch, 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 something dragging its fingers or claws against the fabric of the tent. I clenched my teeth to keep from making a sound. My body screamed at me to move, to run, but I was paralyzed. The scratching stopped. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then the zipper of the tent began to slide down. A cold wave of terror crashed over me. My mind screamed, "Don't look, don't move, don't breathe." But I did. I turned my head. Through the tiny opening in the zipper, I saw an eye. A pale, milky eye staring right at me. I choked on a scream. My hand shot out, grabbing the zipper and yanking it shut. Mia woke up with a start. "What? What's wrong?" Before I could answer, a low, distorted voice came from outside the tent. "Let, Mr. N. It wasn't human. It sounded human, but something was wrong." The words stretched too long, like they were being forced through broken vocal cords. Mia grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Her whole body was shaking. Then from outside, Kyle screamed. "The fire goes out." I shot out of the tent. Kyle was on the ground near the fire, his face frozen in terror. He was staring at the trees. I followed his gaze, and my blood turned to ice. There were figures standing at the edge of the firelight. Not just one. 5. They were tall, unnaturally thin, their bodies just shadows with hollow, glowing eyes. They didn't move. They just watched. Kyle scrambled back, clutching his machete. Mia grabbed onto me, her breath coming in panicked gasps. "What the hell do we do?" she whispered. I didn't know. Then the fire started to die. The flames flickered, sputtered, like something was sucking the life out of it. The shadows stepped closer. My instinct screamed at me to run, But where? We were surrounded by darkness. The only thing keeping them away was the fire, and now even that was failing us. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the bottle of lighter fluid from my bag and poured it straight into the fire. With a whoosh, the flames roared back to life, casting a sudden blinding glow. And in that instant, I saw their faces. Or rather, the lack of them. Their heads were smooth, featureless, except for those deep, empty sockets where eyes should have been. Their mouths were stretched too wide, filled with blackness. The moment the fire flared, they vanished. Gone. Like they had never been there. But I knew they were still watching, waiting, and they weren't going to let us leave. We have to get out. Kyle was shaking. Screw this. We're leaving. Now. Mia nodded frantically. Yes. Yes. We can't stay here. We started packing our gear as fast as possible. But the whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of fear through my body. We needed to leave. But something told me we weren't going to make it out that easily. Something was waiting for us. And the night was far from over. We didn't waste a second. Kyle stuffed the last of his gear into his pack, his hands trembling so hard he could barely grip the straps. Mia clutched my arm, her breath ragged. The fire crackled between us, casting frantic shadows across our pale, terrified faces. We're not staying here, Kyle muttered. I don't care if we have to hike all night. We're leaving now. No one argued. I yanked on my backpack, my muscles tight with dread. Every instinct screamed that we were being watched, that those things were still out there, waiting in the trees, hidden in the darkness beyond the reach of the firelight. We moved quickly, almost running, the crunch of leaves and twigs beneath our feet deafening in the dead silence of the forest. The night air felt heavy, suffocating. I could feel something pressing in on us, a presence unseen but undeniably there. That's when I noticed it. The woods weren't making any sounds, no crickets, no rustling leaves, no distant hoot of an owl. It was the kind of silence that meant something was there, and everything else was too scared to make a noise. Then, just as we reached the tree line, snap, a branch cracked somewhere behind us. We froze. Kyle slowly turned his head. Did you hear that? Mia whimpered. It's following us. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to take a step forward. Don't look. Don't stop. Just keep moving. Then something mimicked my voice. Don't look. Don't stop. Just keep moving. The words came from behind us, not from a person. The voice was distorted, stretched, broken, like someone had taken my words and played them back through a cracked, dying speaker. Mia screamed. Kyle bolted. I grabbed Mia's wrist, yanking her with me, our feet pounding against the ground. The trees blurred past us, the darkness closing in. My lungs burned, my heart slammed against my ribs. But no matter how fast we ran, the voice followed. Don't look, don't stop, just keep moving. It laughed, a horrible, echoing laugh. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and I saw it. A shadowed figure, tall and thin, moving unnaturally fast through the trees. Its limbs didn't bend right, its body jerked and twitched like a broken puppet. But the worst part, it had no face. Only that gaping black hole where its mouth should have been. It stretched its arms toward us, then Kyle tripped. The worst mistake. His body hit the ground hard, knocking the breath out of him. Kyle, Mia shrieked. I skidded to a stop, my chest heaving. He was struggling to get up, pain twisting his face. His ankle twisted at an odd angle. We had seconds. The thing was right there. I lunged forward, grabbing Kyle under his arms. Mia took the other side. Together, we yanked him up. Go! 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 Kyle gasped, limping as fast as he could. Then the trees shifted. 1 second, the trail was right in front of us. The next, it was gone. The trees weren't where they were before. The path had changed. Mia's voice was barely a whisper. No, that's not possible. The thing let out a long, slow clicking sound. It was playing with us. Cal groaned, his weight sagging. We weren't going to outrun it. Not like this. And then, the firelight returned. The circle of fire. Ahead of us, through the shifting trees, a ring of fire. Tall flames burned in a perfect circle, flickering wildly. Inside, standing motionless, 5 figures, the same faceless beings from before. Waiting, we couldn't stop. Kyle stumbled forward. I grabbed a branch off the ground, gripping it like a weapon, even though I knew it wouldn't do anything. The fire hissed as we crossed the threshold. For a moment, everything was still. The faceless figures tilted their heads all at once. Then the screaming began. Not from us, from them. A deafening, inhuman wail filled the air, shaking the trees, rattling my skull. I fell to my knees, covering my ears, my head splitting with pain. Mia collapsed beside me, gasping. Kyle was on the ground, his face twisted in agony. And in the fire, a 6th figure appeared, different, taller, wearing what looked like an old tattered cloak. Its face was hidden beneath a dark hood, but I could feel its eyes on me. Then, in a voice that was not human, it spoke. You should not have come here. The mark. The flames rose higher. The faceless figures writhed, their bodies twisting, melting into the fire. The air filled with the scent of burning hair, charred flesh. I wanted to move, to run, but my body wouldn't listen. The hooded figure raised its hand. A sharp, burning pain seared across my arm. I screamed. A symbol, jagged, ancient-looking, appeared on my skin, glowing red-hot before fading into a deep black scar. Mia and Kyle had the same marks. The hooded figure's voice cut through the chaos, final, cold. You belong to the woods now. Then, everything went black. The awakening. I woke up to the sound of birds. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees. We were back at our campsite. The fire was out. The gear was exactly where we left it. Mia stirred beside me, eyes wide, lips trembling. Kyle sat up wincing. His ankle was fine, like nothing had happened, except for the marks on our arms. I touched mine, my fingers tracing the strange, burned-in symbol. Kyle swallowed hard. Tell me that was a dream. Mia shook her head. Number, it was real. The forest was quiet, but not in the eerie, unnatural way from last night. This was different, like the woods were watching, waiting. And somehow we knew we would never leave this place the same. We sat in stunned silence, staring at the strange black marks burned into our skin. The morning sun had painted the forest in golden hues. Birds chirped in the distance, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Everything looked normal, but we knew the truth. Something had changed. Kyle was the first to speak. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. We have to get out of here now. None of us argued. We packed up in a frantic hurry, barely speaking, too afraid to look over our shoulders. The sooner we left, the better. As we started down the trail, an unsettling realization sank in. The woods felt different. The path that led us here last evening now seemed unfamiliar. The trees didn't look the same. Landmarks we had memorized were gone. We kept moving, hearts pounding, refusing to stop, until we saw it. The loop Mia gasped, covering her mouth. Kyle stumbled back, shaking his head in disbelief. I froze, right in front of us. Our campsite, exactly how we left it. The fire pit, the logs we sat on, even the ashes from last night's fire. We had been walking for over an hour, yet somehow we were back where we started. Kyle swore under his breath. Number, this isn't possible. Mia spun around. Maybe we got turned around. Let's try another direction. We tried again and again, no matter which way we walked, no matter how far we went. We always came back. The forest wouldn't let us leave. The whispering trees, as we stood there, trapped in a nightmare with no way out, the forest whispered. It wasn't the wind. It was voices. Low, distant whispers coming from the trees, speaking in a language we didn't understand. Then, a familiar voice. Don't look. Don't stop. Just keep moving. The same distorted mimicry from last night, but now it was closer. A shadow shifted between the trees, watching, waiting. Kyle clenched his fists. We have to do something. We can't stay here. I looked down at the mark on my arm. The black symbol burned into my skin. And suddenly, I understood. The final revelation. We belong to the woods now. The hooded figure's words echoed in my mind. What if we weren't supposed to leave? What if the forest had taken something from us? Our time, our memories, our very existence? What if we were already part of it? A chill ran down my spine. I turned to Mia and Kyle, my voice hollow. What if we never left? What if we've always been here? Their faces paled. The whispers grew louder. The shadows in the trees closed in. Then, everything went black, the aftermath. When I opened my eyes, I was standing at the edge of the woods. The sun was high. The parking lot was in front of us. The trail behind us was gone. Kyle and Mia stood beside me, their eyes wide with confusion. No one said a word. We got into the car, started the engine, and drove away, not looking back, but deep inside, I knew. The woods never let us go. Not completely. Because even now, as I write this, the mark on my arm still burns. And at night, I hear the whispers, calling me back.